Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is a meeting organised by Talking About Socialism from a Marxist point of view. This is one of our regular fortnightly Monday night meetings to discuss political developments, theoretical and historical issues from a Marxist point of view. Tonight, we're going to be discussing your party. I'm sure that everybody is aware, and that's why you've all come to the meeting. 500,000 and counting is said to be the latest figure, the number of people who have signed up to the call to form a new party by Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Will McMahon, who's going to be introducing the discussion, but a few preliminaries. The meeting will finish at 9 o'clock. The meeting is going to be recorded and it will go out tomorrow on YouTube. So if you don't want anything recorded, be careful what you say. And if you want to turn your video camera off, then please do so. We'll open it up for discussion after Will's spoken for about 20 minutes. And then we'll invite people. Normally, we keep people to about 3 minutes. But if there's anything controversial, we'll extend that. And people, if there's not enough people coming in, people will be able to come back for a second go. If you are watching this on YouTube, please press the like button and the subscribe button so that we can build our audience. My name is Nick Rack, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting, and I'm one of the organisers of Talking About Socialism. So with that, I'm going to invite Will, who is involved with the network of socialist groups, network of independent socialists, get the name right. And they've been organising meetings on the same subject. And there's a lot of crossover between TAS and the NOIS, and I'm sure many others, including people that have visited and participating this evening. So, Will, over to you.
Right, thanks very much, Nick. It's just over 30 years since the Labour Party held a special conference in Easter 1995 to adopt a new version of Clause 4, and this signalled to capital that the party was historically dead as a vehicle for posing an alternative to the capitalist system. The next 3 decades, I think, were a testing ground for that proposition, with the high tide of resistance to it within the Labour Party being the 3.5 years Corbyn leadership. The ruling class response to this was ferocious, I think we would all agree, despite the left social democracy that Corbyn was offering. The programme of 2017 election was to the right of the 1983 manifesto. The mildest of reforms combined with a pacifist foreign policy was simply too much for the bourgeoisie to contemplate. And I think there is a lesson in that response for us, which we might want to discuss. Just over 1 year since the election of the current Labour government, the stage has been set for the creation of a new mass party of the left, because I think of three fundamental trends converging. The first is in domestic policy. Now, I wrote an article for the TAS website in October 2024 describing Starmer as the undertaker of the post-war settlement. And I think there is a whole section of the working class that can sense this. They can smell it. The two-child benefit cap, the winter fuel payments fiasco, the attacks on those who have disabilities, even with a partial rollback on the fuel allowance and disability payments, the signal to the working class is that there is more of this to come. British capital can no longer afford any form of welfareism. The second trend, I think, is in foreign policy. Palestine being the crucible, there is, of course, historical continuity of the Labour Party as the junior party of the United States imperialism following the reorganisation of the global order after World War II. And this was codified in a number of events, the latest of which was the 2003-4 Iraq War. There are now, today, obvious signs that Britain, on the coattails of the United States, is preparing for a global war and huge increases in military spending. So that foreign policy doesn't feel good. But in terms of Palestine, as human beings, did any of us think that we would end up here watching night after night on television, the news, for 18 months, a horror show of colonial exclusionary regime murdering tens of thousands of people? Last Thursday, a British surgeon described on ITN News how young male teenagers were appearing in his hospital. One day with injuries to their legs, the next day with injuries to their heads, the next day with injuries to their torso. A result, the doctor said, of IDF target practice in Gaza. We see tiny bodies with rib cages showing, and there's this international outrage growing, yet still Labour refused to stop selling arms supplies to Israel. It's extraordinary. And Lammy, in his smugness, taking people for fools as he expresses concern at recent events. It's the kind of historical outrage that millions of people will never forgive and never forget. A kind of decisive moment, past feeling anger, millions of people's blood is run cold, and they've decided that they're never going to vote Labour again. The third trend, I think, is the rise of reform. And we can see their outliers outside asylum hotels growing, and they have a plan for the summer, that's clear. Rather than challenging reform, Starmerism concedes to it at every turn, from the abject campaign to stop the boats to the power-like rhetoric of an island of strangers. In reform, a whole section of the working class recognise two things. Both, they recognise a mortal class enemy, and they also recognise Labour's refusal to fight it. The most advanced sections of the working class know that the electoral advance of reform must be fought both electorally and in working class communities, and that the Labour Party is not capable of doing either. Now, for decades, socialists have argued that people should vote for Labour government so that the working class could see the government in action and draw the conclusion that a mass party of socialism was needed. Each of the three trends I outlined above on its own would not have been enough to force a split in the Labour movement, I don't think. But combined together, they've done precisely that. This says something about the period we're living in and the qualitative change in the Labour Party. A former nation of a global empire is now in rapid decline, and the Labour movement's party that helped build the post-war consensus based on material gains of that empire is now in decline itself, and is having to launch a qualitative attack on the working class in its latest government. The shift to the left within the working class in the late 70s and early 80s, produced by Labour's capitulation to the IMF in 76, was expressed in the mass organisational terms in the Labour movement and its political wing, the Labour Party. Times are now very different, and the response is very different. Now, TAS, the advert that TAS put out for this session asks three questions. What is this new formation? What will it be? And what can we make it? And I think they are three really good questions. And, I think that's the kind of structure of the discussion for this evening. But before that, I offer a few ideas on each of these questions. I want to put some thoughts out there, for the kind of discussion you might have a pub, had we had a pub to go to after this meeting. If John McDonnell had not been too unwell to stand for leader in 2016, how different might history have been? If the Labour Party had not changed its membership structure after the 2011 defeat, how would things have turned out? How could things have been different then? More concretely, how different and much better armed are we all feeling compared to the day after the 2019 general election? My guess, and people might have different opinions, is that we're feeling the optimism of the will mixed with the pessimism of our most recent experience in equal measure. And for me, this means we are much better prepared for what comes next. So what is this new formation? As I argued, I have to say, a decade ago at the TUS conference, I couldn't believe it, Corbynism represented the first step towards a mass democratic socialist party of the left following the great financial crash of 2008. 6 years after the huge defeat of 2019, the most radical section of the working class has recomposed, deciding that Labour is no longer fit for purpose and the forward march of the working class towards that mass socialist party has resumed. The working class that has decamped from Labour knows what it is against, but is not quite sure what it's for. The contradictions, I think, within this new formation are absolutely enormous. My view is that we will have a polyglot party, not one simply made up of different parts of the working class and different generations, but also one that's using very different languages. The language of Labourism, the language of left social democracy. From my experience, being chair in the Barnet Labour Party when it was run by the left, the language of liberalism, actually, there's a lot of liberalism in Corbyn's base. The language of pacifist internationalism, some syndicalism, and the language of younger people who have grown up in a post-welfare state society with no security. The language of working class feminism, anti-racism, and that of the LGBT communities. There are lots of different conversations going on in this mass organisation that the working class has produced. There's been an organic change, and we're now in a different position. But there will also be, I think, the language of socialism. Arguments for socialism will have a bigger space in this new party than ever existed in Corbyn's Labour Party. So to my mind, the new party will be inchoate, it won't be fully formed, and what we're seeing now will only be preparatory for a version half its size in a few years' time. What will it be? In my view, the first iteration of this party will be a left social democratic party with socialists in it. A reformation of left Labourism outside of Labour. In other words, a broad party of the left based on a return to the imagined post-war consensus. With Marxists in it, it will be actually, I think of it as the Labour Party of Tony Benn. The weight of left social democracy will be huge, and overwhelmingly, my belief is the membership will vote for whatever Zara and Jeremy agree to put down on paper as a basic programme of the party. The issue being, of course, whether any of it is deliverable under capital. The key question for me will be how democracy functions. And my best guess is that democracy based on a combination of constituency parties and digital voting will be at the core of how the new party will work in the first phase. And I know there's a lot of anxiety about the democracy of the new party, and I think that's right, but I think that points to something that's really important. The idea that there will be no local party meetings is simply not viable. The electoralist bent of left social democracy will demand it. There'll be a demand to go back to that kind of constituency party structure and have democratic accountability. If there are local party meetings, then there will be local party democracy. And if there is local party democracy, then there will be a space for socialists of all hues to operate in and campaign for a party to become a socialist party. It will simply be impossible to organise 500,000 people in any other way. For example, if only 10% attend 50 regional meetings, then that's 1,000 people a meeting. I mean, that won't be a democratic process. There'll be rallies, and it won't be felt to be a democratic process. I think that's the really important part. The democratic question is key at this phase, in my view, because whatever the politics of the wheelers and dealers, the reaction to any hint of preventing local meetings will be strong. My view is that both Corbyn and Sultana know this, and they know the game will be up if the basic democratic principles are not adhered to. Given the very recent experiences of activists in the Labour Party, it was a horror show. And I think people are really sensitive to the democratic question because of what Starmerism did and how it did it to people. I mean, I spoke at a meeting last night on a completely different issue to the ex-executive committee of the International Labour Party. And they were all elected in 2020 and straight away expelled. They didn't even take office. And I think a lot of this went on. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of sensitivity on the democratic question. And that's a really good thing. And we should major on that, in my view. So the third question is what can we make it? I think the whole of the left is going to be a huge debating chamber. Socialists are in a position to create a mass democratic socialist party out of all the contradictory politics that exists within the new party formation. And I think it's, of course, essential that we engage with the process and make decisions about how to proceed as the process unfolds, with socialists playing a key role in that unfolding, wherever that might be. It might be in the grassroots, it might be through being trade union members or whatever. I think there are key strategies that we need to think about employing. I'm sure there are others, but these are just a few thoughts that I've had, really. The first one is that we create internal united fronts that focus on ensuring the party is a democratic mass campaigning party in local communities and trade unions, and that it focuses on the essential material interests of the working class, because that's going to be key. Anything else simply will not do. Secondly, it is that the forms of the basis of electoral intervention. Secondly, it is in that form of being local campaigning organisation that is the basis of electoral intervention, not the other way round. We have to fight electoralism tooth and nail. Arguing that elections are a platform for arguing for socialism, making propaganda, and also a way of testing out the strength of the party. How strong is this party in societies? And of course, people elected should champion radical socialist demands, and we should campaign for that. Another really important united front is protecting the one person, one vote democracy. I think our hand is strengthened on this on this question by the inaction of the trade union bureaucracy. They will not affiliate, but cannot prevent members joining. We should insist that trade unionists are central to the development of the party and form party fractions inside their trade unions. But I think we should be opposed to any form of federalism of membership, i.e. a return of the bloc vote, which will kill this party stone dead. And we must resist that. So while building internal united fronts for socialist policies, socialists at the same time should argue we need a mass party of socialism that can offer a social vision of a different kind of society. I think one of our core messages is that the post-war period shows that capitalism will only offer concessions if it is forced to, and that the only way to defend any gains that we did have was to create a different kind of society. Otherwise, in the future, we'll leave space for the powerful to take back concessions they were forced to offer. As the last half century has demonstrated, the period of social democratic reformism is finished, I think, and we must say that. Socialists need to make it clear that we do not think these demands can be met under capitalism. A new society will be necessary that puts at all times people before profit. And I think that argument will make a lot of sense to people if we get our arguments together and have a coherent case to put. I think some key areas of engagement. Core framework, therefore, should be a programme of political demands focused on the core issues that capital actually can't deliver on. They are demands of the majority. There are huge majorities for taking into public ownership of water, energy companies, public transport, and for providing affordable housing. All of these demands are red lines for capital, but basic needs of the working class, on which you can mobilise a majority of millions. We need to be supporting, of course, trade unions when they take strike action. I mean, the Labour's response to the doctor strike is absolutely phenomenal. You can see they've got no sense of what's going on around them. Yeah, they're going to do the same thing if the other strikes take place inside the NHS. So we need to be there all the time, and there needs to be no prevarication over that. And I can't see why there should be. Yeah, Corbyn and Sultana would be on those picket lines. That's the kind of thing they would do, and we should argue for that. We should argue for mass campaigning on issues of war and peace and democracy. We should build bases for socialism in working class communities, because the battle for reform isn't just going to take place in the ballot box. It's going to take place in communities and on the streets. And I was at a Palestine pot banging session by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign on Saturday. 80 people turned up, and so did the far right, right? And there was enough of us to confront them. So there's going to be some of that as well, and we need to think about that really carefully. We also need to make sure that we meet the electoral test, not electoralism, but the electoral test. It's going to be a test of strength in May 2026, where the majority of council seats will be contested. Now, I think if you think where we were in December 2019. If you think where we were when Starmer was kind of rampant in the Labour Party, expelling people, really difficult times that we faced, really terrible times we faced. I got a text message today from a councillor in Barnet, she was a Labour councillor. She was a black councillor, and she was attacked terribly by the Barnet Labour Party in a racist manner, and she suffered a lot because she took a principled stand. And there are loads of people around like that. She texted me to say, I am so delighted that I have a party to join. Yeah. And these people will want to go and stand. They will want to stand again, and we should be behind them when they do that. But we should make it clear that the reason to stand is to make propaganda and politics for socialism. Now, we should have confidence when doing this. We are living in what academics call a polycrisis. I don't know whether you've heard that dread phrase, but a polycrisis. The ruling class in this country, I think, is weak and will resort to repression in the face of a crisis in the social order. They can't live in the old way. They've made that absolutely clear. Starmerism is that signal, right? And neither can we. And in this process, we need to keep hold to two firm principles. Firstly, socialism. Secondly, democracy. They can be our guides to create a mass socialist party that could threaten capital's rule in an imperialist heartland. And one final aspect, which I really haven't had time to cover, but I think also we might want to discuss at some point or another meeting, is how to build a united socialist tendency within this new party. I think that's a key task. How can we begin collaborating with other socialists in this new party to make sure we are as strong and as powerful as possible? A socialist tendency that argues in order to in order to defend the interests of the working class and to address the environmental emergency that we face, we need socialized production and a socialist society.
Thanks very much, Will. Excellent introduction. So much there to think about and talk about. There's a lively chat taking place on the sidebar. But what I would like to do now is invite people to come into the discussion, either with questions or criticisms, or to develop points either that Will has made or ones that you think have been missed and that you want to make. Don't hesitate, because that will just take up time. So please put your hands up. And if I miss anybody or appear to be missing anybody, if somebody can shout out and point them out to me, because I can only get 5 people across the top of my screen at once. So who wants to come into the discussion? Okay.
So I always first.
Sorry. If people can use the yellow hand to put their hand up if they want to speak, or to indicate by raising your hand, then I can see you.
I can see Peter, but Barry was first, I think. I can see Peter as well.
So Peter Kennedy and then Barry.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, I agree that with most of your points really, and especially obviously Starmer's Labour Party is kind of like the last leg in a long process of Labour looking more and more like the second 11 of the Tories and outstripping them in many ways, and they've been doing that for 30 odd years. So, and a lot of people don't have any illusions in the Labour Party, and this is a split that was going to happen at some time, some point or other. You characterise the split as, and the party itself, as being a left social democratic in the old Labourist style. And so I was wondering, given, what's to stop it? And if it becomes a mass party, what's to stop it being top heavy in electoral politics and a machine for electing people into Parliament? That's one thing. And I know one way to stop that is from the ground upwards. Now, you mentioned what we can do, in the kind of unified way, but who's the we? I wish it was that case. At the moment, we're all different we's in small groups, and we find it hard to kind of come to terms with our own differences, and possibly there's an opposite. this your party has said that they're going to set up some sort of conference, then decide on a structure and all the rest of it in the future, in maybe a couple of months' time, towards the end of the autumn or whatever it is. So one thing is that could we not act together now to try and forge some sort of unity amongst some groups, at least so that we can enter kind of at branch level in a unified way. I also think because it's like the social democracy of old and there's lots of socialisms about, we need to distinguish ourselves by, claiming the ground of communism. And one name, you can put up many names, but the Communist Unity Group. And if we could forge some sort of alliance around that amongst the different groups and bringing them into a kind of communist unity group at ground level, then that would give us the ability to kind of win over branches. And then the last point is, I don't think we can do that in every branch. And I reckon what the best thing to do strategically, if we were to unify, is to choose some of the target cities, the main cities, to affect the branch politics there and win people over to our ideas, so that we can win the battle of ideas and maybe prevent this new kind of labourist social democracy becoming a rerun of the old one. There's a lot going for it. It isn't part of the old system. It's got to, as you say, it will be standing on picket. Those who kind of lead, the Corbyns of this world will be on picket lines as well, and all the rest of it. But anyway, that's something I was thinking about as you were talking.
Thank you very much, Peter. Barry.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Peter that we can't go with the social democratic flow. We have to stand out against that, and we have to campaign from the outset to turn the party into a socialist party with a distinctive form of politics. And Peter's suggestion about campaigning as a communist unity group is a good one. At the moment, we have to fight against the direction that quite a lot of people want to go for, and that is an umbrella, an electoral umbrella, a federalist electoral umbrella that has its focus almost exclusively on elections. Now, Corbyn has talked about an umbrella. It's not clear what his final politics will be. And the SWP and the Socialist Party are also pushing the idea of an alliance or a loose federation. In other words, Socialist Alliance Mark II. Now, that's exactly what we don't want. Now, as far as they're concerned, they're the party and they're the alternative leadership. But of course, we don't agree with that. And that's why they're in favour of federation and a loose alliance. They don't want a branch structure. They don't want individual members. They don't want a membership-led party. They don't want a political alternative to their politics. Now, we have to initiate, I think, a branch structure. And so that means what we can do from the outset is seek a branch structure, take an initiative in local areas where we have some members and seek the establishment of a branch party. Now, at the moment, the people who are running this in the shadows, who are they? We don't know. Who's got the membership list? We don't know. So it's important that we don't wait for a top-down structure. that we take the initiative now as Marxists, as communists, as socialists. We take the initiative and do as much as we can to establish a grassroots membership structure and oppose the attempt to make it into an exclusive electoral alliance. As the speaker said, of course, we're not against standing in elections to promote Marxist or socialist ideas, but we don't want an electoral federation. I don't think I want to spend too much time on the points about the Labour Party, but I'll just make one. I mean, the idea that the Class 4 died in 1995, Class 4 was dead from the very beginning. It was just a symbol to mislead workers in revolutionary times after the First World War. But we're not here to discuss that. The Labour Party is obviously hollowed out. It's finished as a working class party, and we're facing the danger of reform, opening the doors to fascism. If we look at the danger of Essex, what happened in Essex, yeah, I'll wind up now. We've got to bear that in mind. That's the danger, the threat, and that should motivate us to take action.
Thanks very much, Barry. I've got Soraya and then Stephen.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Will. I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the contributions of the comrades so far. I think just looking at the chat, I don't have any illusions about the people who've been involved in setting up, if it has been set up, and that's how secretive it is and unclear about them, about the role they want to play and their aims in setting up this party. But I disagree with the comments of Ant on the chat, because I think the fact that hundreds of thousands have put their names down, whether they can join or signed up or whatever, shows that because of the role that the Labour Party is playing under Starmer, which is worse, I mean, it seems worse than Blairism, and the shameful position, I don't need to rehearse here, that they're playing Gaza, you name it, as Will was giving the example of the doctors on strike. That shows us an absolute, and it's not surprising, is it? An absolute desire for something that isn't the Labour Party and the way it's behaving, but that is representing working people and actually wants to do something to change. So the fact that we may have, I can only speak for myself, my view of what intentions Zara Sultana and Corbyn, we know what that these people are social democrats and believe that you can make a kinder capitalist society at best. That doesn't mean that that those people who have illusions or hopes or whatever, all those people are not social democrats. And so I think it's really important for us to intervene. As Barry was saying, I think it's important to set up branches, to argue for democracy, to argue what sort of party this should be, and to have a voice to intervene. We may not succeed, but it's in molding it. But the point is, the only way it's going to, firstly, the people who've shown an interest and an absolute thirst for something different, and that they've signed up. It's really, if we don't intervene as socialists, communists, to argue for a proper party, a communist socialist party, aiming to change society, get rid of capitalism and change society, then it will be left in the hands of those who just want it to become an election campaign machine, and that the people who sign up are just foot soldiers to come out to do the slog for the people, the dignitaries, or the people who want to become elected. I mean, I'm not against socialist communists being campaigning and standing and being elected, because that's a marvelous opportunity. So I really think it's important to intervene in this, and I don't think the starting point should be. I think you can raise a positive position and raise that social democracy is not going to change things for people in a way that is positive, without kowtowing or appearing to support or argue for social democracy.
Thanks very much, Soraya. Stephen.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks to Will for a really useful introduction, I feel. So I think my point, it's similar in certain respects to Soraya's, but I think it particularly relates to the issue of putting forward socialist or communist politics within this new formation. And I think one thing that's been notable from the outset, and I think was true of Corbynism as well, is a lack of clarity around political ideas a lot of the time. I think that, you know, the years in the Labour Party, they didn't really result, I would say, in necessarily really kind of the development of and serious debates of political ideas. You know, that kind of. I personally, I don't think that the movement deliberately, anyway, came to sort of educate those members, and I think that has obviously had many problems. I think it creates lots of political confusion in the wake of the Corbyn leadership ending, and is, you know, probably why there's possibly a significant crossover of people who voted for Keir Starmer in the leadership election of 2020, not being aware of the likelihood of this being kind of a right wing, essentially a right wing reversion, basically. But I think the current lack of clarity does have some benefits for us, in the sense that I think the leadership are very unwilling to put forward clear ideas on what the nature of the party is, what its politics are, and in that sense, it creates a massive vacuum at the moment for people with ideas. And I think, you know, I've certainly seen, you know, it's just kind of a constant stream of extremely useful and clear positions that have been taken primarily by communists, and, you know, over the last couple of weeks in relation to this party. And I think, as I think everyone has said so far, it is really a case of taking the initiative and taking the steps that currently the leadership are unwilling to. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So I don't see any hands up at the moment. Perhaps I can't see them all. There are some comments in the sidebar that are different from the ones that we've heard so far. So do any of those comrades want to put forward their arguments? Anybody got any further questions or any difficulties that people see with the arguments that have been put forward so far? Can I ask everybody to keep their mics muted?
I think Kate had her hand up.
Kate, sorry, I didn't see that. Kate. Nikki, can you turn your mic off, please? Thanks.
Yeah, it was just a question, really, because Dave Nellis organised this meeting of people in unions as part of this. And about the federal thing, he was saying, he's arguing, because he's Socialist Party, I think. He was speaking, he said that Tusk organised this meeting with the unions. So he said he was arguing for federal structure of existing socialist parties to affiliate independent councillors and unions. So I couldn't see a problem with that. So, but now the argument is that everyone should join as an individual. So all the people in the Socialist Party, if they wanted to join this new party, they would have to join as individual members. I can't understand why you can't have both things, but someone can explain it. I mean, is it this the idea that this is exploitative? Because I know in the Labour Party, a lot of those people were expelled and excluded in these left parties, and they couldn't join. But now presumably they could join as individuals. But I guess they would prefer to be linked in as their own party. Is that the problem? So I don't know, someone explain it.
That's a very good question. I think specific, particular questions like that are important because they do help to clarify. I see Barry's got his hand up, but I'll hold him in reserve just to see if there's anybody who's not yet spoken. Again, I can see Ant has commented in opposition to the thrust of the speakers so far. So I don't know if Ant wants to come in and make his points. But otherwise, I think, Barry, you want to answer Kate's specific question, do you? Do you want to come in then, Barry?
Okay. Well, I was hoping that Ant would join the discussion because I think his points deserve a response. But on the on Dave Nellis and Tusk and the Socialist Party, it's their position. I know Kate thinks you can do both, but their position is for a federation or an electoral alliance. And that gives them the ability to jump on the bandwagon of a new electoral party that will have more credibility than their own record of standing in elections. But they're not in favour, and they've made this quite clear, they're not in favour of individual membership or a membership party. They're against any local branches. And if, I don't know whether Kate remembers the Socialist Party's campaign for a workers' party. And there again, they were against individual membership. They were against local branches because they just want an arrangement whereby they can retain their party and their control. On the way that that meeting was conducted, I'll just finish on this. You can contrast it with this meeting where TAS always allow non-TAS members to speak, always allow people to intervene, whereas the TUS meeting, every single trade union member that was selected to speak, keeping out non-SP members from the floor, all of them were members of the Socialist Party, but didn't acknowledge they were members of the Socialist Party. And most of them wouldn't even acknowledge they were speaking in a personal capacity and not representing their trade unions or their national executive committees. So that the whole debate and the whole thing was to give the impression the trade unions were behind the new party and behind Tusk and the Socialist Party. So they don't want a membership party. We do.
Thanks, Barry. Can I see if anybody is wanting to come into the discussion or the debate to make any contrary points or develop any other points? I'm going to keep scanning to see any yellow hands go up or if people shout out. I'm going to chair myself in, if I may, and it's partly in response to Ant's point, but it's a general point. The forces of Marxism, that is of revolutionary socialism, those that want to abolish capitalism, are weak and are small. We have to find ways of getting our ideas across to other people that are confronting the system and its consequences. Here we have 500,000 people who have expressed an interest in joining a party that they think might do that. That's the only reason that I can think of the majority of those people wanting to get involved. And they will extend from climate protesters to protesters about the genocide, disability protesters, people that are defending welfareism. Our job as Marxists, as socialists or communists, in the sense that we want to abolish capitalism, is to explain that everything that they are confronting and challenging is a consequence and is caused by capitalism. War over Ukraine or Israel, Gaza, is a consequence of imperialism and of capitalism. Climate catastrophe is a consequence of the capitalist system that cares not a jot for the environment, but prioritizes profit. Welfareism cannot be met on the basis of this system. So all the arguments are in our favor. So we should go into this party, in my opinion. We should try to work with others who share our ideas, and we should make our arguments boldly and clearly. And I think that we will find an echo. And of course, the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people at the beginning will not necessarily be on our side on everything, even on anything. But by patience, we will make headway. So in my opinion, we need to have an intervention, an active, supportive participation, but making it clear that we are not social democrats. We do not believe that the irreconcilable interests of the capitalist class and the working class can somehow dovetail together in, as Soraya suggested, a kinder or fairer capitalism. That is pie in the sky. So we need to make the arguments not to manage capitalism, but to abolish it. And to do that, we need a mass party, which it looks like we're going to get, but a mass party armed with socialist or communist policies. And that's what we need to develop, and we need to find a way of putting those forward clearly on every single aspect. And we can patiently explain. You just take the question of the bin men. When Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell first took over as leaders of the Labour Party in 2015, one of the first things that they did was send out a letter to all council leaders saying that they must not set deficit budgets. That meant that they were telling Labour councils at that time to implement cuts. We have to explain you cannot manage capitalism in the interests of the working class. And by doing that patiently, carefully, skillfully, in a friendly way, but being firm in our way of presenting our arguments, we will win support. And that's how we'll build the ideas of the transformation of society that's necessary. Thanks. Can I see other people that want to come in?
We have Peter.
Peter. Sorry, I can't see you. Peter, yes?
That's okay, thanks. Yeah, just picking up on Vicky and Barry, and it's good points. And I'm assuming that any organisation like this that we enter, then the idea is that we join the organisation as individuals, and we vote as individuals. But also, do we not have factional rights, factional groups? How do they differ from the point that Barry and Vicky were making about, these kind of block votes and that kind of thing, because they're kind of block votey-ish. But they're assuming that the factional groups will be open, and they will be committed as members, individual members, to the mass party, and be open about that, and allow full debate amongst those who aren't part of the factional group, and give them plenty of time and air to discuss their alternative views, and then try to win the debate around those things. So it's a kind of more democratic way of doing it. But I wonder if Will could just kind of address that too, these differences. So, are we coming at this party, in the way of like developing factional groups who fight for particular views, particular positions, based on an overall perspective, which is the socialist or communist, but in a more democratic way, by not kind of smuggling in block votes and trying to marginalise debates and all the rest of it, which I'm presuming that's that's what we don't want, and that's what's happened in the past with Labour.
Thanks, Peter. All good questions, all good points. Yeah, how do we go about it? I see Frank, for example, in the sidebar has raised some critical comments about the approach that's been argued for generally so far. I don't know if Frank wants to come in, but no problem if not. I don't know if anybody else wants to develop any points. And I know that I would come in and say a couple of things if I have time, but I don't want to stop anybody else. Okay, so Vicky's asked a question. Maybe is somebody wants to. Nick, where do we start? Do we address specific local issues very early on and show who we are through immediate actions and solutions? I'm thinking of the very successful French left. Perhaps I don't know if Will's seeing all the stuff that's in the sidebar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I come back with a few points?
Of course, Will. Yeah, you come back, and then maybe that'll prompt some other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is the ongoing discussion with Taz and others about the use of the word communist or the use of the word socialist, right? Okay, so I mean, I tend to describe myself as a socialist, and I don't think there is anything wrong with entering a formation of 500,000 people that want to see a different kind of society and arguing for what I think of as a socialist program within that. Saying this is what I think, that's what you should do. Actually, I also think, and the point I was trying to make is that there are lots of. I'm trying to avoid using the word transitional because I don't think it's helpful, but there are lots of demands that have popular majorities in this country that we could fight for and win within such a formation, which capital would not be able to deliver on. Yeah, they're not going to sit by and watch the energy industry, the water industry, the public transport, the mass building of what they call social housing, but we should be proud to call council housing. They're not going to think, oh, that's not a problem to us, because that threatens huge areas of their profit-making capacity. Yeah. And in fact, housing is like one of the key sectors where they're making huge profits. Yeah. So I think we can get majorities inside a left-wing party for that by building kind of what I described as internal united fronts. Yeah. And that would include both people from the SWP and the Socialist Party and others, and people who think of themselves as left social democrats. Yeah. So I think you could construct a political program for the left party that would be quite radical. But at the same time, you argue very strongly that we have a fuller program which says you're not actually going to be able to attain all this or defend it without moving beyond the capitalist society we live in. And we can explain why. And there are really lots of really obvious arguments why. So you can do both. And in fact, I think it's politically necessary to do both. I take Nick's point about, I mean, nobody has illusions, I think, in the leadership of this new formation, whatever it may be. Yeah. around Sultana, the leadership of Sultana, who kind of caved in when she signed the Stop the War petition 2 or 3 years ago, but around Corbyn sending the letter out. I know I felt completely defeated when I was chairing the CLP and somebody stood up and read this letter out saying, I see Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have told you not to set illegal budgets. It was massive error, an absolutely massive error. So nobody has illusions in the people who are leading their politics. I would say it's not about them as people, it's about the politics they represent, which is social democratic politics. As far as, just very briefly, as far as the SWP and the Socialist Party and federalism are concerned, I've worked alongside, and again, this isn't about any individuals in these organisations, and I, know and get on with many people in these organisations, but my experience of both the SWP and the Socialist Party from the Socialist Alliance on from 2000 is it's what suits their organisational needs that counts. It's not what's in the interests of the working class. And I think this is a real problem. And so, for example, the Socialist Party would not accept one person, one vote in the Socialist Alliance and walked out, rather stupidly, because had they stayed there, they would have inherited it off the SWP when they went into respect. Yeah. So it turned out to be a bit short-sighted from their point of view. And I don't think that, I think that if the SWP and the Socialist Party want to join, they join as individuals. They can have a fraction inside the party as individuals. I've got absolutely no issue with that. But federalism has two aspects of it. One is it allows what I think is an undemocratic relationship between the leaders of these very small, actually, revolutionary groups compared to the size of the organization we've got. A symbiotic relationship between them and social democrats. It's a nice little divide up whereby they happily would back the emergence of a social democratic party as long as they can be the revolutionaries. That's the whole thing. And I don't think we want to see anything like that. So I don't think we want to see any form of federalism. I just don't think it would work. I think it's one person, one vote, socialist democracy, and that's what we should argue for. I mean, of course, in history for the Socialist Party, there's this whole thing on other people about, this is how the Labour Party was formed with the Labour movement, in the 1900s and all this kind of stuff, right? And there's a fixation on this, and there are others who were Socialist Party members who have this fixation. But I just think that was 120 years ago, comrades, and, different time, different period, and we need to have different tactics. So yeah, you can both have a socialist program or a communist program, if you want to call that, and argue for it and try and build a majority for it, and also build united fronts for socialism inside this left party. And maybe down the line, I mean, I think it will personally, I think it'll probably half in size, but it will have clarity on its political program. Now, we don't know what that clarity is going to be, but clear enough, there is a space for our ideas and winning majorities for our ideas. And I think we should be confident about it. I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff about James Schneider and his, being, an advisor to Corbyn and all this kind of stuff. And, I almost get this kind of Svengali thing with him, that people think he's really dangerous because he has a lot of, frankly, half-baked ideas from the 1980s and 1990s. We can deal with these arguments, and we should deal with these arguments. We should have no fear of them. Schneider's one person. The coterie around collective are actually small numbers of people in a party of 500,000. Yeah, there's small numbers of people. We have the arguments that can make a difference, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should make them. Otherwise, you're just saying, well, okay, you have it. And I don't think we should be saying to people, we should be saying, socialists and communists shouldn't be saying, you have it because you're a load of social democrats, you have it. We're off doing something else. I don't know what.
Thanks very much, Will. Great points. Before Barry comes back in, I'm going to just say a couple of words myself, just on the points. Kate asked a very good question. Can't you do both? And in a sense, you can, if you do it in the way that Barry suggested, and the way that Will's just suggested, and the way that I would suggest. And that is, my argument would be that the Socialist Party should join en masse the new party. the Socialist Workers' Party should join en masse the new party. And so should all the other groups. And they should then organize their individual members into a fraction or a faction or a group, as Peter suggested, and they should fight their corner. In that way, they're taking responsibility for the development of the new party. And they have to fight, really, for their programme to be adopted by the new party. As Will's just explained, the federalism approach allows them to abdicate responsibility for the direction of the party and the programme, and allows them to present themselves, I don't think successfully, as being the real revolutionary party. And this cozy relationship that you have between what might be called revolutionary socialist bag carriers for social democratic leaders, I think is not something that's particularly helpful. And by the way, the same thing goes, in my opinion, for the question of trade unions. In my opinion, trade unions should not be able to affiliate and therefore influence, by dint of the money that they pay, to influence the direction of the party programme. So, for example, an example from just recently or a couple of years ago, GMB and Unite wanted more money to be spent on arms manufacturing because they've got trade union members in those industries. We wouldn't want in a socialist party anything to do with that. And so we wouldn't want, through affiliation, right-wing trade union bureaucrats being able to buy, essentially, a block vote that impedes a development of a socialist program on imperialism and war and opposition to selling arms to Israel. I think that there's a lot of lessons that can be learned. And again, it will be interesting to see what Jeremy Corbyn and others do. If you remember, in 2018, Jeremy Corbyn and his office, along with Len McCluskey, then the leader of Unite, opposed at the Labour Party conference open selection of MPs, what used to be called mandatory reselection. We should be fighting in this new formation for accountability and recall, workers' wages for all elected representatives, and anybody that doesn't do the business should be recalled and kicked out. No MPs for life. We want people who will be tribunes of the working class. Again, on the question of do we do this more successfully on the outside or on the inside? Well, it's a good question and it's an important question. I think that we will make our arguments to a receptive audience and we can make gains. And it might well be that joint participation in an organization like your party, whatever its name becomes, between the different socialist organizations might, maybe I'm wishful thinking here, might just push them to the idea that they'd be better off if they collaborated on the question of programme, the question of democracy, and it may just force those revolutionary socialist or communist organizations to realize that they've got a common interest. And they could, if they organized and acted together, win the leadership of the party and take it in a completely different direction to that we will expect from Jeremy Corbyn, Sultana, and the people that advise them. Thanks. Barry, you had your hand up, but before you come in for a third time, is there anybody else that hasn't spoken? Okay, Barry. Barry?
Okay. Well, you might want or like the Socialist Party and the SWP to do certain things, but they're not going to do it. I mean, They want federation. They want a socialist alliance Mark II, and that's going to be their campaign, and we have to oppose that. Now, you can't do both things, or you can do both things. Well, I don't agree with Will that you can do both things. You can work with social democracy and social democratic ideas and push it left, his transitional program or his transitional suggestions. That's just fudging it. I agree with Nick that we campaign for a socialist and communist program, a socialist and communist party, not fudging it with working with to push social democracy in a left-wing direction. All that's failed, hasn't it, within the Labour Party, the long history of the Labour Party, Will. And surely you're not suggesting we repeat all that Trotskyist entryist stuff. So I don't agree with you there. We should stick to our communist program, because just a final point. Nick started off by saying that their politics, social democratic politics, will not work in the current situation. And he's right. Just one example: welfarism, the welfare state. Well, it's just nostalgia for the post-war settlement. It doesn't exist anymore. The crisis in British capitalism and all the other political factors that have emerged since the end of the post-war settlement means those kind of social democratic politics will not work. Now, if you say, as Will does, that we can work with social democratic policies, you're going right against the grain of what Nick was arguing there.
Thanks, Barry. Interesting developments in the discussion, which are going to continue. Again, I'm sure people are following in the sidebar. There's clearly antipathy to the very idea of joining the party, on the idea that really somehow that it will be a capitulation to alien ideas. I don't buy that. I think in the Labour Party under Corbyn, everybody knew that I was a Marxist and I argued for Marxism. I got expelled twice for it. So maybe that will happen. We will have to argue for democracy, and we'll have to argue against bans and prescriptions. And there are people that will be in this party from the very beginning in prominent positions who've already expressed antagonisms towards what are called far left or extreme groups. And we'll have to, we don't just accept that. We fight against it. And we explain to other people what is it they're fearful of. What is extreme, actually, about what we're arguing. They say that they're in favour of this, that, and the other. Well, we're arguing how it can be achieved. And most people, I think, in this party will not be in favour of bans and prescriptions, and will be open to the ideas of people organising. Peter, followed by Soraya.
Yeah, just a quick one. On the issue, I agree with Nick that, this idea of democracy, thoroughgoing democracy, will make a difference if we could win that battle whereby anyone elected would be under some sort of recall, which was structured into the rules. They can't be there forever. And also they propagate socialist ideas if they're up there, if we can get them to do that. But this idea of democracy works again in the sense of, Will mentioned before about the social democratic stuff around nationalizations. Now, and he mentioned kind of, skirted around the term, but transitional. I know you didn't want to say that. You weren't talking of that. You were kind of pointing to certain things that you said that capital would just find impossible right now. And so that would really, really push the working class up on its toes to struggle for that and push the capitalist class back on their heels. So I think you possibly can, if it's the old nationalisation. If you look at what capitalism can do during the COVID crisis. It can just play, it can just pour out money. You can open that Bank of England and pour money out when it wants. Quantitative easing for the banks as well when it wants to. Now, what it can't do, and I think this is where the point might lie, is do a different kind of public ownership whereby people actually ran the thing from the ground upwards and with under working people, democratically controlling all aspects of this publicly owned entity, whether it's an investment bank, whether it's like the energy rail, the water, and all the rest of it. That would certainly be a difference, with where so the key thing is democracy again, and working people being able to be in control of that, be placed in control. Because under the old system, we know what happened, don't we? There were bureaucrats and there were ex-capitalists on the boards of these rails, and they were looking to run them very cheaply for the benefits of capital, so that they could cream off profits in the industries outside of the public sector to run them at low cost, and so they were poor services. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that the key issue is democracy. That's what they can't abide. They can pour money into anything if they want to.
I think all these are excellent points that people are making, and I know I make this appeal at every meeting, but if we are going to try to persuade people of what we're saying, we need to write these contributions up for articles for the TAS website so that they do reach a bigger audience. I'm going to call in Soraya and then Kate, and I know Will want to come back because I think at least in the sidebar, well, anyway, Will can speak for himself. So Soraya.
Yes, I think the position is, as I said earlier, that lots of people wanting change, maybe not having read, not that I think you have to have read the collected works of Lenin, Marx, etc., to understand that capitalism doesn't work, but who haven't reached necessarily a clarity that we hope we have. And don't forget, we learn, well, I can only speak for myself. I've learnt from experience, and in life we generally seek, don't we, the easy route. And if somebody is telling you, somebody who is famous, as it were, and is telling you, yes, we can make, like Corbyn, we can make capitalism kinder. They may not use those words, but make things better. Let's tweak the system, etc. Let's tax the rich, and then everybody will be all right. It's people are going to have to go through the experience to draw the conclusion, well, actually, no, that doesn't work. But, for a start off, I'm sure, I imagine loads of the people who've put their names down are young, so haven't had a huge experience of anything else. And so how do you, to use the awful expression, win friends and influence people? How are you going to win people over to the idea that actually that is not possible? Reforms, long-term reforms are not possible. They always get snatched back, and that this is the only way to change society. How are you going to influence those people? Is it by standing aloft and looking down and saying, oh, these people are hopeless and useless? People who don't know, who know that Jeremy Corbyn sort of stands for being principled and so on, who haven't had the experience that we've had of him personally when we're in the Labour Party and so on, you're not actually going to draw them to the ideas of socialism and communism. You're going to alienate them from the outset. Now, that does not mean, and Will can speak for himself, but I don't think for 1 minute Will was saying this, and I certainly am not saying you then join this party and sort of pretend that you're a social democrat, and then you're going to take off the and unveil the Superman outfit at a later stage, the super Marxist communist at a later stage. It's about arguing that you can't have reforms and you do need to have a program to change society, but you've got to get people's ears, and for them to even start to listen to what you're saying, you've got to stand by them. Now, that doesn't mean people are influenced by the extreme right ideas of reformism, you join reformism. This is a different formation, and I don't think for 1 minute that anybody who says participate in it is arguing you put forward the ideas that social democracy are the answer.
Thanks very much, Soraya. Kate.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted some clarification over the role of the unions. I think it was UNIC that was saying that the unions have power because they offer funding, and so they've had, and the block vote and everything, they've had control because of the dependency on the unions. That meeting, Dave Nellis was saying to people in Unite, if you're in a branch, you should be arguing for Unite to disaffiliate and support this new party. So that would be funding. So what role would the unions? Would they all have to join as individual members, and would they not offer any funding? Where would the funding come from? Is it just from members, or is it other stuff? I'm not very clear about any of that, really. So,
okay, really good questions, Kate, and no simple answers, and I'm sure there's as many different approaches as there are on this Zoom call. But I'm going to call Will back now to deal with the discussion, and then we'll wrap up in in 10 minutes time.
Okay, I'll be brief. The reason why I tried to avoid using the word transitional is because it was inappropriate to use, Barry. It's the wrong term. What I was arguing was that we should have a clear socialist program that explains that social democracy and its like are unable to deliver the kind of equal society that people will want. Yeah, we should be very clear about that, because otherwise we're not being honest. Yeah. At the same time, I would happily ally with a social democrat in the party if they want to join a campaign I want for a policy that is around the nationalisation of the energy companies under worker and consumer control, because they would think that's basically a basic democratic right, and I would agree with them. And I would ally in other campaigns on other issues with social democrats who I agree with on that, because it fits into the socialist program that I've got. So it's not the method of and I went through this, so I understand where you're coming from, Barry. Like in the early 80s, we had Ben, Skinner, Livingston, Adams, and all that lot. Yeah, that block. And in the imaginary, they were actually really closet Marxists and socialists. And that eventually, when they got into position, they would, then they would split the Labour Party. None of that happened. And there was no point in people hiding what they really thought. And I have to say about the Marxist groups in the Labour Party at that time, they didn't hide what they thought. Actually, the IMG didn't. I don't think the Militant did. Certainly didn't. And lots of organisations didn't hide their thinking, which is why I was talking about a Tony Benn Labour Party. Yeah, before the exclusions and proscriptions and expulsions. That's why I kind of mentioned that. But I do think building united fronts internally is really important, particularly on the issues that capital cannot give over. I also agree with Soraya about young people. I mean, there's a whole layer of young people who are growing up in a society which is entirely different to the one that I grew up in. Yeah, and in terms of home ownership, in terms of council housing, basically Margaret Thatcher created a mass rental society. That's what she did. More people are renting now than have mortgages. Yeah, excluding people who are in social housing. And one of the things that Corbyn tapped into, and I noticed during the first period, was this crisis that young people face in terms of getting an education or an apprenticeship, particularly going to university. Yeah, then having to pay huge amounts of money in rent, having to pay huge amounts of money back in student loans, student fees, right? These are real material issues that we can present an alternative and say, this can be done, and there's no reason why we can't do it. And as it happens, I think as people found over the last, I don't know, 10 years of the World Wide Web, 20 years of the World Wide Web, you've got to have a democratic organization. You have to. Communication is really open and wide now, and the idea that, there are secret meetings with people in it, just won't wash. And I think that they won't accept a basic lack of democracy that we should all expect. All the points that Nick was making about how we hold those who are standing in elections accountable, I think really, really important and really crucial. And I also think that my point really about the SWP and the Socialist Party is they are more afraid of the 500,000 than I think the left Social Democrats are, because they could control the Socialist Alliance, yeah. They could control, if they'd wanted to, they could control Left Unity, but they didn't bother to come in. The Socialist Party want this kind of federalism because it's about control. But the thing I noticed when we built the Socialist Alliance in Hackney, which had a big SWP branch, the crisis for the SWP came when we started having members who said, I'm a Socialist Alliance household. Yeah, it started to exist as a party in its own right. And what we started to get was rather than a transfer of people into the SWP, we had a transfer of SWP members into building a socialist party. And that's when panic set in. And that's why they went for them. And why, in many ways, Respect was came just in time for the SWP on that one. The thing I would finish on is that I think it's really important for a certain layer of people that we don't dismiss backward-looking ideas. And the reason I think that we don't do that is some of them, that we have a free NHS, yeah, that we have a nationalised public transport system, that we have nationalised energy companies, I would say under workers' control, but that's for the future, yeah. That all those things were really important gains of the working class in minds of a layer of the working class, right? And sometimes it's very backward, what apparently are very backward ideas can push people into quite revolutionary and radical directions, So we have to keep that in mind. So it's not about pandering to social democrats. It's about having the argument with social democrats, how you create a society that is based on equality, because we have the answers to that and they don't.
Thanks very much, Will. And thanks to everybody who participated. I thought that was a really interesting and engaging discussion that went from the theory to the practice, the tactics, tackling different questions. I just want to thank everybody for coming. I just want to finish with this. If we, as people that want to end capitalism, didn't think that people could change their minds and be influenced and won to our ideas, we might as well give up now, because the only way we'll change society is if we persuade the majority of people that it's necessary. I think this is a really good opportunity for us to try to do that. If you're interested in participating with us in what we're going to be trying to do in your party, then please send us an email via the TAS website. You'll find it on the About section. Send us your details. We'll get in touch and we'll find a way of working together. We've got another meeting in a fortnight's time, but we're looking at the question of the programme, and it may well be that it's oriented towards how we work on specific aspects of the party, but that's up for discussion inside TAS. Thank Will again. Thanks everybody, including those that contributed in the sidebar, and thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again in a fortnight's time. Good night.